Welcome. If you need some support, check out my donation-based products and access my free IFS guided meditations at faithfullygrowing.com. Additionally, if you're finding this podcast helpful, consider making a tax-deductible gift to help keep IFS accessible to all. And you can do that at faithfullygrowing.com/donate. Welcome back to another episode of IFS Meditations and Insights. I'm Tim Fortescue, your guide on this journey, here to help foster spiritual wholeness and healing through an internal family systems lens. In this caring space, my aim is to dive into self-discovery and inner knowledge. And I truly believe that when we accept all parts of ourselves, we're able to experience deep love and to live more fully. And I'm thankful to be a part of this community in your path to inner peace and sacred connection. Today, I'm going to talk just a bit about the film Inside Out 2. And I take much of what I share today from listening to a podcast with Tammy Sollenberger and David Politi on Tammy's podcast, The One Inside, and by looking at David's Substack on his insight into the model and watching the film as an IFS trained therapist. And if you'd like to check out more of David and Tammy's work, you can check out David's podcast. It's called Empowered Through Compassion. And then Tammy's is The One Inside. And also, if you'd like a special meditation where I lead you using the parts and emotions that came up in Riley's mind in the movie, and kind of help incorporate that with a journey into your own mind. And Riley's the main character who was a preteen in the first movie. And spoiler alert here, I am going to give maybe some things away into the second movie. And so if you haven't seen it yet and it makes sense to pause and watch this after you see the movie, I totally get that. But in the second movie, Riley is moving into adolescence. But if you'd like that special meditation, you can get it over at my website, faithfullygrowing.com. And then finally, before we jump into the content, if you'd like more experience in getting to know your own parts and mapping them out on a page, once a month, I hold a group to help you do that. And you can get more information on this parts mapping group. It's just a one-off group and you can attend it once or many times, but you can sign up and get more information about that on the website also. But with that, let's begin another episode. Last weekend, my wife and I, who is a therapist, went to see the movie Inside Out by Pixar. And it's the sequel to the first, and both are based on internal family systems. So today, thought I would dive in just a little bit to the fascinating perspective that Pixar gave and offer some of my insight and perspective. The original film, Inside Out, was a hit, and I'd say this sequel even surpasses it. And it's good to remember in approaching the film, first and foremost, it's entertainment. And I found that as I watched as an IFS practitioner, it was hard to get my analytical parts to soften back and to know that this movie didn't have to align specifically with the IFS model, because it doesn't. And that they didn't have to sit there trying to figure out, is this a manager or firefighter? Where's the exile? Where's self? And so I tried to get my analytical parts to soften back. And of course, it's very hard to do that, and they couldn't. And I found too that this probably isn't the best date night movie as a result. of that and to have dinner afterwards, because I just had this film on my mind and wanted to analyze, and that analyze part was really up for most of the night. And so I'm going to let those parts have some fun today on the podcast, and hopefully you get something out of it. But I should probably go back and watch the film from a purely entertainment standpoint. Not probably, I need to, and I would enjoy it a lot more. And so if you're a therapist or a practitioner out there that resonates, I'd love some feedback and knowing that there are others that are standing in solidarity with me. And I hope you can feel that too from me. But this being said, Inside Out and Inside Out 2 are tools to help explain fundamental IFS concepts in a relatable, down-to-earth way. And the visual representation of those parts, joy, sadness, anger, and fear, aligns with IFS concepts of parts. However, I would say that IFS does go further by suggesting that these parts inside reside in different areas of the bodies and in many different ways. They don't have to be all in our mind, and they don't have to all be emotions. They can be, but when we tune into our bodies and in other ways with a more somatic and less heady approach, at least from time to time, we can better understand how different parts manifest physically if it's difficult to go with feelings and the thoughts inside of our head. And David, in his Substack, also points out that while the movie portrays these parts as human-like, IFS parts can appear in various forms, and this diversity in appearance highlights the unique and personal nature of each individual's internal system. But a brilliant aspect of both Inside Out and Inside Out 2 is the concept of the console, where different emotions take turns controlling Riley's actions. And this mirrors the IFS idea of blending, where one part dominates our behavior. And the intention of IFS is to achieve unblending and a more balanced system to get those parts out of some of those extreme roles and remind them of who we are. They play a part, but they're not alone, and allowing other parts to emerge and enabling access to self-energy is key. Self-energy is the essence of compassion, curiosity, calm, clarity, courage, connectedness, confidence, and creativity. What we call the 8 C's of self-leadership from an IFS perspective. And although the movie effectively shows personality and memories, it lacks the explicit concept of self-energy. And I believe, along with others, that incorporating more self-energy would enhance the film's representation of our internal systems. But it does incorporate in the sequel the idea of self-energy, and even has a representation of that. In IFS, self-energy, as those that are longtime listeners know, is the source of understanding and compassion for our parts, helping to repair their relationships and providing a sense of inner harmony. And Inside Out 2, as I mentioned, does introduce the idea of a sense of self. And while this is a beautiful concept, it differs from self-energy in the model. Self-energy can't be changed in its essence. It remains constant despite thoughts or memories, and it provides a foundation for understanding and compassion, helping parts to heal, to take a break, and to relax. One thing I noticed, and I'm guessing at this just like others are, but is that those emotions or parts in Inside Out, the first movie, who were also in the second movie, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. There was a time in the movie where a lot of those parts that were in the first Inside Out were exiled and pushed to the back of the mind and out of the forefront. And those parts really reminded me of what a balanced system or regulated system looks like and how parts work within that when they're not in those extreme roles. And then the new characters that showed up in the sequel, where anxiety was managing the console for most of the time, they really reminded me of the unbalanced or dysregulated system. And so this concept of this regulated and dysregulated system was kind of beautiful for me in the movie, and I realized that they were both encapsulated in Riley's system, so the imagery breaks down a little bit, but I was keyed into that and thought that that was a neat aspect of the movie. And I saw too in the movie, the first one and the second one, Joy in the first one was kind of managing the console. And at the end of the day, she would do a review where you would kind of disregard the memories and put them in the back of your mind, launch them there, those that you didn't really want to remember. And even though they call them memories in the movie, I could see a lot of many of those quote unquote memories as burdens. And then anxiety was managing the console for most of the time in the sequel and Inside Out too. And at the end of the day, anxiety seemed to launch back things that weren't necessarily bad memories or burden. And they launched a lot of good, if you can call it that, and kept a lot of what I saw as burden. So it really jumbled up with those bad memories, quote unquote, in the back of the mind that I see as burden with the good memories or what makes us unburdened. And so it was really a jumbled up mix of burdens and things that were positive and not burdens, or bad memories and good memories toward the end of the movie. But there was a point where there's a representation of the sense of self that was also kind of broken off and tossed to the back of the mind, and Joy and the parts around her had the intention or goal, which again represented a regulated system, to try and retrieve that self energy essence and bring it back from the back of the mind. And there was a point when Riley, the character, was playing a hockey game and she got put in the timeout box and her mind was swirling. And I mean, there's an intense part of the movie where it represents this. And then there's a beautiful, what I saw as an unburdening of where those parts are kind of being resorted and those burdens or those bad memories are taken out. And I believe I'm getting this right with the movie. Again, my analytical part was all over the place, but the concept of those bad memories were being taken out, those burdens. And there's a part where the emotions embrace that sense of self, the imagery that Pixar identifies. And I really wondered if that was a representation of what self and self energy could be. The best of our parts coming together and even embracing what was the sense of self in the movie as it was being restored. And not that what was being restored was the self, but those gifts coming in and bringing that image back to its best. Because self can't be blemished. It doesn't need to be restored. But those parts hugging that sense of self, all of them at their best, that was self to me, or a representation of self and self energy. And let's look back at, the sequel, Inside Out 2, and the movie and the concept of Riley becoming a teenager. The movie really captures the complexity and challenges of adolescence. And as a parent of preteens, I really resonated with a lot of this because this is a time of significant change and emotional turbulence, and Riley's personality islands which is something else you see in the movie. They undergo transformations. And with those islands, you have different islands of various personalities. Some may be different relationships like family and friends. And these islands reflected the evolving nature of her identity. And there was a lot of construction going on because our minds and bodies are changing during that time. And the movie introduces 4 new emotions, and those are anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui, which represents boredom. And these new characters added depth to the story and highlight the ongoing struggle for control within Riley's mind. And in IFS, these new emotions, many of them can be seen as protectors as well as the older emotions from the first film, guarding the exiles or the internal little ones and trying to manage and protect them. These exiles are parts holding pain and trauma. And like I had mentioned, my mind went crazy trying to categorize all of these parts. And sometimes it's hard to do. I mean, if I'm honest, it's even challenging sometimes in my own work and with clients, particularly in that protective realm. And often, whether it's a manager or a firefighter, doesn't matter a whole lot to the path to healing. And when it does need to matter, it's evident that we're working with a manager or a firefighter. Generally, though, parts are categorized in the model as those protectors, those managers that are more proactive, and firefighters that are more reactive, and those exiles that have literally been pushed down. And the protectors are doing the best they can as guards of our internal system. And the movie does introduce some of Riley's exiles. And what IFS has helped me and others do is to kind of, unblend, to map out, get a better sense of our parts and understand them so that we can foster a better relationship with them. It's in that space between us and our parts where relationships can happen. And this process helps parts to unblend, allowing more access to self-energy. And again, David describes a moment in the movie where anxiety unblends from Riley, realizing its actions were harmful. And David and Tammy in the podcast talk about this, where Joy's compassionate response offers a hug instead of rushing to control, and exemplifies the healing power of unblending and self, and helping clients become more self-led, helping myself become more self-led. Man, it's hard. Life is hard, and those parts are popping in all the time. But when I can pause and unblend and get to know those parts, it has a significant benefit. And with my clients too, helps them connect with their inner world, and they deepen their relationships with themselves. And as a result, relationships with others become easier and better. And you see this in the movie as that sense of self evolves, or those parts come back into a more regulated state and work together. Kind of brings us, to the end. And it kind of brings us to the healing. And the kind of the conclusion of a movie is that from dysregulated to regulated is a good plot line there. And I think that's where self emerges, leading to a more fluid and inclusive and solid core identity. But there's a sense of mystery there. And while the movie doesn't fully capture that self energy, it does effectively illustrate the importance of teamwork and mutual understanding among our parts. I think self is somewhere in the mystery in IFS and in our work. And the best self, in essence, is hard to nail down. And I think the film gets that right, even if they didn't know it. And somewhere in the mystery in our parts' work, the best of our parts come together. That's the self. Those gifts that our parts bring, they're not their burdens. They are those gifts, and we put them all together, and it makes us who we are. And that was depicted in the movie. So let me conclude here. Inside Out provides a profound understanding of IFS, and by viewing the film through this lens, do it first and foremost as entertainment, and then, if you want, kind of analyze a bit. Maybe watch it again for that, especially if you're a practitioner, or maybe you have to do it like I'm going to do it and let those analytical parts go crazy first and then watch it again. Or maybe you have no choice. Maybe that's already happened, but we can appreciate the intricacies of our internal world. And Pixar's done a great job of providing a resource that can help us and others all over the world understand this idea of parts and to leave some mystery to explore and make our work our own. But the importance of embracing all our parts is there. And so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend it, especially maybe helpful with some of these insights in mind. And that wraps up another episode of IFS Meditations and Insights. If you found it useful, please share and leave a positive review to help others find the podcast. For more content, visit blog.faithfullygrowing.com for a free categorized list of meditations and insights. As always, your thoughts on the podcast are welcome. Send me an email to tim@faithfullygrowing.com. But thanks so much for being a part of this community. Remember to be compassionate to yourself and others, and I look forward to our next session. And until then, take care, stay curious, and embrace all the parts of your journey.